Hi there, my name is Kelly Cody Grimm.
And I'm Max Grimm.
And we are Creative Actors Lab. What we want to do is just talk a little bit about how you can bring creativity into your everyday life. All right. Hey, everybody, it's Kelly.
And Max.
And today our podcast is something that I think for you and I, it's pretty close to our hearts and something we genuinely believe. So today we're going to look at, and by no means is this a complete look because there are so many books, experts, neuroscience, but today we are going to talk about the creative brain. It's something that, I was actually listening to a YouTube video that had Dr. David Eagleman on there, and if you're not familiar with his podcast called The Inner Cosmos, it's excellent. And so he takes neuroscience and makes it very approachable, talks about our brain, why our brain does certain things. For me, it's answered a lot of questions about my brain and sometimes how other people's brains work. So me personally, I've just found it very helpful. So he talked a little bit about the creative brain and how important it is to be creative. And I don't know about you, Max, but do you wince every time somebody goes, oh God, I don't know how you do it, I'm just not creative?
I think that has a lot to do with people have the perception that creativity is for the arts.
Yes.
And the arts only, and that is not the case. It's creativity can be applied in any area of life, in problem solving, in in any amount of things. I had actually at one point I was putting together a curriculum for a class in creativity and what it is and how it works and how we do it and how do you use it and all that sort of thing. And I just started going back through the old notes and I'm like, my God, there's so much to this subject. And when you do hear people say, it's like, I'm not creative. Yeah, you are. You just don't know where to apply it. You don't, you have a very limited understanding, or the person, I should say, has a very limited understanding of the definition of creativity, and how many different ways it can be applied. What are the creative uses of creativity, the creative uses of creative thought? How many different, how many different ways can you apply this? It's just a different way of thinking. And we do get very conditioned in the society to, just put our brains on kind of like one comfortable mode of thinking, of cognition. And being creative can be a bit scary.
But you know what? Children don't get scared of it.
They don't.
That was one of the things that he said. If you get a group of like 4-year-olds together and you have them get creative and you get them finger painting and you get them doing Play-Doh and all that, they haven't developed the judgment. So they're just going to go for it. And that's such a beautiful thing. That's one reason why you and I really love coaching kids, particularly younger kids.
Just look at them and go, did that just come out of you?
Wow, that was really good.
This like little person over here, look at you,
But as we get older, I think we get told, that's impossible. You can't do that. And then you start to judge and you start to shut down. And so whenever somebody, and I actually was on a phone call earlier with someone that says, oh, I see improv. I could never do that. I'm not a creative person. And I'm like, you are. And when we did the show on Viola Spolin, her thing was you can pretty much teach somebody to be stage worthy. They have that ability. They just tell themselves, no, I'm not stage worthy. But the fact of the matter is you can teach people. But, again, with Dr. Eagleman, he said, what's interesting is the scientific brain and the creative brain are both very much alike. But science, you have to be creative to come up with a theory that's scientific. And then another point he made is like, when you look at animals, gazelles, deer, they're pretty much doing the same thing they've been doing for hundreds and hundreds of years. They haven't tried to innovate any of that. Now, if you get monkeys and chimps in there with their brains, and you're teaching them different things, but more likely than not, they're being taught how to do something or trained how to do something more than actually creating on their own. And I thought that was very interesting. Whereas humans, from the get-go, we've sat back and went, oh, okay, well, I need to innovate this and I need to innovate that. I need to live in a cave. I need to have fire to cook things. From there, I need to build a home, and then I need to create the arts, because doing all these other menial things isn't enough. I need more.
Yeah. Well, there's, I think, also in this society, the arts are not really valued as well as they should be. I mean, if you're in some kind of situation, some kind of institution that teaches various assorted subjects, and all of a sudden money gets tight, what's the first thing that's going to go? The arts.
Yes.
Period. That's just how it works. I mean, it sucks, but that's how we do business in this society.
And the thing is when you do, again, have arts funding in schools, so many studies back up that kids are actually better critical thinkers. Mm-hmm. They are able to come up with a number of solutions to problems rather than just the one, because their brains have been acclimated to, there's more than one way to think about this as a creator. And I think if we teach our kids that, but if we teach ourselves as adults, and it's never too late to do that. You and I talked about the exercise where we do the library. Mm-hmm. And we have people talk about a story, and and you and I are coaching them through and saying, what does the cover of your book looks like? What is the first few sentences? What's happening in the middle and the end? There'll be two of one ways that people do that. Either they had that idea to begin with, or they just came up with it. And both times when you're saying, hey, that's a good idea, work on it, they're just like, really? Because they just have been told, no, you're not a creative person.
I can say many things here, but I will just in no particular order. I've said this is one of these things I've said to students over and over and over again. At some point or other, if you've ever had me as a teacher, there's the story about Picasso, and his quote was something like, "It took me 4 years to learn to paint like Raphael, but it's taking me 20 years to remember how to paint like a child." Mm-hmm. And, the thing of it is that people get scared of creativity because we don't want to look foolish. Mm-hmm. How many, you just pull, I've been around any amount of people who they will come up in any amount of situations. They'll come up with some idea and they'll just want to share it. And the response they get is ridicule and laughing and people pointing their fingers on and going, what kind of moronic idiot are you to come up with that? And so people just went, okay, I'll just shut up. Mm-hmm. And that is so unfortunate. And generally speaking, the people who are doing the ridiculing have been the ridiculed at one point.
Yeah, the oppressed become the oppressors.
And they just squash the creativity. And it's like, stay in your lane. Just, keep doing the same thing this is the way we've always done it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And people don't want to get out of the rut and start exploring new things, experimenting. Maybe something's going to work, maybe it's not, but you won't know unless you actually get it out there and put it out in the world. And the other thing, and I've had this phenomenon happen to me a couple of times, in these 2 different jobs, was it? This was within the printing industry, and the guy who's in charge of everything, it's in these 2 different situations, was this, pompous, narcissistic, egotistical blowhard. Mm-hmm. And both guys shared the same qualities, and they got into some, shall we say, spirited discussion with somebody else about creating a certain product, and they don't really know how they're going to do it. But the other person opposite the blowhard says that's impossible, you can't do it, and of course they get the blowhard gets all full of himself. I love it when people tell me I can't do something. I'm going to go ahead and do it just to prove them wrong. Hey Max, you figure it out, and then they totally walk away. Mm-hmm. And I'd seen that happen so often that you kind of get to a point, and you just, all of a sudden you get this thing put upon you that is going to be very difficult because nobody knows how to do it. And it was up to me to devise the methodology to get these products produced. Mm-hmm. And it would require all kinds of jury rigging and Rube Goldberg-ish type of inventions and all of that sort of thing. But lo and behold, I would get the stuff done. Then the pompous, egotistical, narcissistic blowhard goes, look what I did. I resent the hell out of that. As a creative person, as somebody who uses my brain in many different ways to have that, it's like, look, you don't have to pay me any more money. Just put credit where credit is due. Maybe say thank you. Is that so difficult? Well, if you're a pompous, egotistical, narcissistic blowhard, yeah, it really is difficult for these people. So you get to a point, and I got to a point where it's like, I'm going to, as somebody once told me, and very wisely in a situation like that, play dumbass. And that's exactly what I did. Mm-hmm. Because I wasn't getting paid anymore. I wasn't, I was getting kind of thrown under the bus and had to dig my own way out of it. And my creativity did that, but I just kind of got to a point of like, I'm going to stop saving this person. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna, I'm gonna, it's like, it's just this weak, lazy way of approaching things and putting it off on other people, other creative people, and then taking the credit for it. That breeds so much resentment.
And I think so often in companies, that's why people shut down creatively. I mean, mm-hmm. even if you're in a marketing company and you feel like, oh, okay, well, the vice president's always stealing my ideas. And the thing is that you don't have to hoard ideas. One of the things we tell our students is, you'll only have probably 500 million, maybe a whole billion ideas in your lifetime. You may not act on all of them, but they will definitely come there. Something else in this YouTube video that Dr. Eagleman was talking about is that when they've done brain scans, and mm-hmm. when your brain sees something new, it's like a fireworks. Mm-hmm. Just as far as the neurons and everything. Yes. Yeah, it's like, oh, that's new. Mm-hmm. But then as we get repetition, then it's like, oh, that's cute. Oh, yeah, okay.
You tend to get numbed out to it.
You get numbed out to it after a while.
Dopamine hit tends to get reduced.
Which is why within routine and things that keep your brain healthy, particularly as you get older, it's very important to try new things, to get out there, to be creative. Mm-hmm. And, I think, as much for you, look how fearless children are because they don't know any better. They don't know judgment at this point. They know that they probably shouldn't smack their little sister or their little brother, but they don't know that their idea is bad because, hey, it's Play-Doh, it's fun, I'm playing. And, just again, getting back to that, I think does so much for your psyche. But too often in the workplace, people's ideas just get shut down. And, when we play a game like Yes and, I love doing that as a team because when your idea can't be shut down and people are going to build on it, all of a sudden there's a whole different, and it shifts paradigms.
When you feel that you're supported. I mean, I can remember being a little kid, until I was 8 years old, grew up in this little bit, or at the time it was a little bitty town. It was called Hope Sound, Florida. We had 2 TV stations. We had a couple of radio stations. Otherwise, it was just this pretty, not completely rural, but very, very small town. And just me and a couple of my friends. And we just, this is before the internet. This is before personal computers. This is before all this stuff. This was, and this was even, I can remember, this was even back before like the first moon launches. Mm-hmm. We, and we had stuff like blocks. We had clay. We had like the, very rudimentary toys. We had stuffed animals, stuff like that. That was it. you know. We had crayons and watercolors and stuff like that, but that's what we had. And I can just remember, you know, me and my friends, I mean, just coming up with all these wild scenarios and all this play acting and pretending and all that stuff. And I just think it is very unfortunate, you know. You know, I was talking with one of the daughters last night. I said, you know, I'm very sorry that you never lived in a world before the internet, um, because people just thought differently. I mean, just, you know, just now with the internet, everything is so fast. If you know you want to Google something and find out, great, you know, it's right there. And in many ways, that's fantastic. But at the same time, parts of our brain are being shut down. These certain like portions of our intellect, we just don't have use for it anymore. Because we can just go to the keyboard and, you know, go to Google and, you know, click and enter like the information you need. There's you know, YouTube videos for whatever you want to get into, and we did not have that. It was dependent upon us, upon our talent and our intuition and our imagination and our, you know, open dialogues with one another and not shooting each other down. And that's how we functioned. We had like this intellectual, psychological, emotional set of tools that we just don't use as much as we once did. I mean, people of you know, my age, I've seen the shift in society from the time that I was a little kid to now, and we're still human beings. We're still, you know, we're still people. We still have our, you know, people are going to be people, and that's what we are. However, just everything comes to us so fast, and we don't have to really apply ourselves. We can just click, enter, and there it is. And in some ways, that's very magical. But at the same time, it's a shame because we as human beings are really losing a part of ourselves, and that makes me very sad.
Well, but I mean, look at it this way. I wanted to look up Dr. Eagleman's work. Happened to see, I mean, he's written books, which I'd like to read, but, you know, basically did a whole, you know, hour-long discussion in Auckland, or no, I think it was in actually Australia, about creativity. And he actually was talking about that younger kids, it was like, oh, how did you come up with it? Oh, actually, I Googled a TED Talk and happened to see this person talking about that, and it really got me interested. Now I'd like to go into engineering because I heard this engineer on a TED Talk do that. So I think there's pluses and minuses, but I think the reality is there's things that our kids and grandkids or, you know, future generations are going to know in even 20 or 30 years that they're going to look back on and go, really? You guys thought that? And we do that now. But I think, you know, those innovations and access, I think the downside, you know, again, from a creative brain is where you have people that aren't getting out and socializing, that so much of their socialness is being done online. It's on chat rooms, it's on social media and stuff like that. And actually sitting in a room face to face with somebody is somewhat of a skill that we're losing. And just wanting to be, I mean, I can tell you, I love coaching people online for demo reels. That's really cool. I do miss pre-COVID actually being in a room and having people perform their monologues and getting the entire reaction to everybody rather than, oh, it's not time for my monologue. I'm just going to turn off my camera and go do something. And then you'll be going, Abby, are you ready to go? Abby. Okay, well, let's jump on to something else, and then hopefully Abby will be back. Whereas, you know, obviously if you're in a classroom, you know Abby's gone to the bathroom, so you're not going to call on her. But, you know, so we're kind of losing that. But I think from a creative standpoint, just learning and doing the world building is so much, you know, something else that Dr. Eagleman was talking about is when for him, it's almost like he used the term lazy Susan, and I think maybe you and I know what that is. I don't know if older or younger people do, but it's kind of like it's something that you put in the middle of a table, and then you put condiments on there or entrees or whatever, and then you, rather than passing, you just spin it, and then people can get what they want. So he was saying he just
like dim sum and
yes.
Anyway.
So what he was saying is that's what he tries to do creatively, is just kind of have that lazy Susan and have a few things that he's working on. From a creative standpoint, I also think that's important, like writers, because I'll have people, who will sit there and go, oh God, I've just had writer's block and I can't. And I get that way. I've been working on a novel for a minute, and I'm getting to the point where I'm seeing where it's coming together, but there's just times where I'm like, yeah, I just can't work on this. And rather than castigating myself, it's like, oh, I have this other script I want to work on. I want to work on this. I have a podcast to edit. Let me do a little bit of research for that. So there's always those things. And when you talked about last week about taking that 20-year pause, rather than just not being creative, you did things like writing poetry and painting and cooking
and photography.
So there was all those other parts of the creative brain that was being accessed that wasn't specific to acting. And that's, I just think as human beings, again, we're not who we were thousands of years ago. And, we're not living in caves and scratching and going, But, we're living in homes, we're doing podcasts, we're creating movies, we're doing all those things right now. And there are creative scientific solutions. My prayers with so much of, what's going on with the climate and everything, there's people trying to be creative and look at how can we try to fix climate change creatively. So you've got solar power, people trying to amass that and things like that. So at the end of the day, the creative brain, and this is where like every human being is creative, but I think sometimes the expectations, and I just got a few more requests for demo reels, and I have someone going, I want to be a very accomplished actor, and I'm like, oh, that is so good, but it takes discipline, and it's not going to take time. And it takes time, so it's not going to be one demo reel, one premiere, and boom, you're going to just start doing stuff. That does happen to people, and I'm not going to say that doesn't. But the beautiful thing is, if you go into it for the love of the art and not the expectation that, oh, I'm going to get all these really great things happening
money
right away. But when you really work hard for it and it comes to you, just savor that. I mean, think of the times in your life where you were really hard to get something, and it took a lot of hard work, and then finally it paid off. Oh my gosh, that feels so good. And so, kind of look at your creativity that way. Is, we were talking about different avenues. And so when I got let go from mental floss and not said, you know what, I'm going to stand in my power and change, I would never have met you, more than likely.
No, we never would have met, I can tell you, because this was before you were involved with the company. My acting teacher, my first acting teacher at the time said, you need to go see this improvisation group. And I said, okay, I will. And I have this, just not to go off on a tangent, but just briefly, I'll say, when I go to a performance or a movie or whatever, it's my habit to sit towards the back in the center. If I'm in like a real theater, I tend to sit up on the mezzanine, like, the first rows of the mezzanine around center, so that I can sort of look at the whole big picture of the thing. And so they started to do the show, and they said, everybody move up front. And I was like, no, I'm right. I'm good where I am. And this one buffoon person, grabbed me by the arm and started pulling me towards the front. And I was like, okay, I can't wait to get out of here. And I was like, I will never go back to this place again. And I have another story about them, but that's for another time. But I was just saying, I will, if I, as an audience member, if I can't sit where I want to sit, guess what? I'm not going to come back. But
yeah, I remember when they used to do that, and I'm always like, just let people sit where they want to sit. You can encourage them to come up front. Yeah, hey guys, there's room up front, but to physically drag them.
But to me, it has to do with, what what do you want your perception? How do you want to have your perception be set up of the event that you're viewing? And when I'm not allowed to do that, I tend to get very unhappy. We actually we went to, this was a couple of years ago. I do not remember the lady's name, but this was at the High Museum of Art, and it was this big show. I forget the name of it. But it was this, and they had these like collection, these things that you would actually walk into, and there's all kinds of like sparkly crap in there, and all these different colors. But you were basically in like a circle of like this room full of like a circle of mirrors, and it was meant to be. And you'd walk in the middle of this thing, and you'd have all these, reproducing images and this stereoscopic sort of viewing is what it's called. And the problem, and you'd walk in there, the problem was they would only let you stay in there for a few seconds. And it was like, no, I want to stay in here and see this. And it's like, no, the artist only wants you to see it for a couple of seconds. And it's like, okay, the artist can create whatever they want to create. That's fine. But don't tell me as an audience member how to view it, because that's on me. You can have your intentions, you can say, and you're going to want people to maybe see things in a certain way. However, that's not the way it works. We just, we're all human beings, and we all view things differently. And when it's like, you can only view this particular thing in this way, and it's like, well, for me personally, if that's all I'm going to get, I'm not going to come back. I feel something is really kind of, infiltrating on my perception. With me personally, does not sit well at all. Now, I will say this. When it comes to creativity, just because I was always the weird kid and all that, and I was always, all full of beans and coming up with crazy ideas and all this stuff. And I had this teacher in second grade, Mrs. Oliver. This woman really grew to hate me, and the reason being, because I would just, I would sit there and go, but what about this idea? What about that idea? And it's like, Max, this is how we do things. And it's like, and you can't do this and you can't do that. And it's like, anytime I would say, I would ever hear this, you can't. I'm like, oh yeah? Well, we'll just see about that. And I mean, I was the biggest pain in the ass of this woman, but she just got to the point where she really, really seriously did not like me. And then I got into third grade, and I had this teacher, Mrs. Kinzer, loved her. She was into art. And, because when I was in first grade and there was nothing really going on, I'd say to my teacher, can I draw a picture? And she's like, of course you can. I got into second grade, and I would have my work done and everything. It's like, can I draw a picture? No. Put your head down.
Oh, I used to hate when they would tell you to do that.
And then third grade came along. The teacher would insist on drawing pictures, and I was cool, but I just remember that second grade, it's just, you're in your formative years, and to have your creativity kind of stepped on and squelched every time you turn around by this, adult in power is just, that's one of the things that really kills so many kids in terms of their creativity and their thought process. Didn't do it for me, because I was just like, oh yeah, lady, we'll see about that. And, but then at the same time, then I'm remembering when I got much older and I got into art school. I had this one teacher, Mr. Carnegie. Sometimes we called him Bob, sometimes we called him Mike, whatever. But he was one of the best teachers I ever had. And I remember he would just do these things just to get our brains going. And I remember he that one day he was teaching illustration and things of that nature, and he got up one day and he started reading these short stories by John Steinbeck. And it was just this sort of a thing, and just the writing was very visual. It would, you're just listening to this, and you can see the movie going on inside your head, and you can see all the images, and he's just kind of like, just whatever you think, whatever any of that brought up for you, just draw it. Write it down on paper. Get it, get the bits and pieces in your head, process them around, and then get the process thing out into the world. And that's, and he was just all about that. It's great to have all these ideas, but you got to get them out there. You got to share. And that's where people get, that's where people get scared, because they think people are going to look at them like they're crazy, or they have no talent, or, God forbid, it says something regarding the way the society works, or, some sort of spiritual religious concept that is particular to them, and it's going to piss people off or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sometimes creativity, sometimes art is not pretty.
Yeah.
But is it sincere? Does it come from the heart? Does it, come from a genuine place? That's what's important. And just not
Mm-hmm.
everybody is going to appreciate that. Now, I can remember being in fourth grade, going to this. We had just moved to Miami, and I remember we went on a field trip to I believe it was called the Miami Wax Museum.
Oh, I
Do you remember
that?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And now my mom decided to be like a chauffeur or just like a
chaperone.
Thank you. And they had this one display, Pablo Picasso painting Guernica, the big giant painting, which basically, if you're not familiar, but Guernica is this giant painting by Picasso that basically depicted a war, a battle in war that he witnessed, and it is not an easy painting to look at. It's really, and I remember really seeing that display when I was 9 years old, and it was really disturbing. And I remember my mom and my teacher at the time were standing next to me, and my mom says something to the effect of, "What was that guy smoking?" And the teacher was like, "Yeah, I know, right?" So, and I just remember going, "No, guys, no, come on! It's the guy's getting his soul out on canvas and paint, and it's like, no, it's not a pretty picture, but it's a very important one." And that's but just so much of that stuff is like it doesn't jive with my perception. It doesn't, or my opinions of things. Therefore, it's not valid. Well, yeah, it is. You may not like it. You don't have to like it, but it's not required. But you do have to let people have their say and get it out into the world. Because this stuff will resonate with other people, and they, if you look at a painting like that, you will have some reaction to it, and that's really what it's about. Is just getting people to see new things, to perceive things in different ways, to welcome other points of view, and that's so much of what this is about. And people just get scared of ridicule, of maybe going into some parts of their own subconscious that maybe they don't particularly want to face. This is how you heal creativity. With creativity, not just artistic creativity, but with creativity in general. It can help people work out so many things in their mind, in their psychology, in their subconscious, just to get it out into the world and deal with it for what it is. And that is how we heal, and just we're losing that. And that's why there's some really ailing people out there.
One of the things that they brought up in this is that creativity is our biological mandate. It is important for us to create and innovate because, again, if we weren't going past where we were as cavemen, we wouldn't have figured out, how to, make medicines that people need for things like diabetes, high blood pressure, other healing techniques and things like that. How do you deliver a baby in a safe way and things like that? And other scientific, how do you get a rocket up into the atmosphere and get a rocket out in space and get the Voyager 1 to be 12 billion miles away from Earth and still send back signals? That blows my mind.
The creative use of science.
Yeah, the creative use of science. And science really, at the end of the day, is very creative because you're having to take certain things. And I love what Einstein, who many people consider probably one of the top scientists ever, and just said, creativity is intelligence having fun.
Yeah, there you go.
So if Einstein sees that, why can't we? But one of the things is that you can divide creativity into bending ideas. So you have an idea, you kind of want to bend it, you want to play with it, things like that. Then you break it up. Then you kind of break it up into smaller portions, see what you can break, and then reassemble. And then finally you blend. So again, if you're working with other artists, if you're working particularly as performers, we're blending constantly. And that was the one thing, I guess, for me as an improv actor. Your mind has to work really fast because you don't have the repetition of a script. You don't always know what's going to happen. And I think that's kind of the fun of it too, is the audience is there helping you create. And that may be, and I hadn't thought of it before I heard of that, but that may be a little bit the attraction of the endorphins that can go through your body when you're both performing improv and you're helping give suggestions as an audience member, because then all of a sudden it's like, oh, they're taking my idea and they're acting on it. Literally, they are acting on it, and they're doing that. And then they're saying, thank you. Not to sound like in my day, but one of the things that kind of bothers me that I've seen more, and it explains it as improv actors who you get tired of hearing, can I get an occupation? Gynecologist, proctologist, can I get an object? Dildo. Can I get another object? 2 dildos. So what's kind of become the norm for a lot of improv troupes is, hey, we're going to do vignettes and we're going to do long form. I need one word. So they get one word from the audience and then they take off and they build that one thing and they reincorporate it. And I think that's interesting, but at times I think it's more interesting for the actors than it is for the audience, because they're challenged to make things out of that one word, but you're not going back to the audience on a regular basis and tapping into their creativity. So you've got, 4 people calls out one word, they decide to take that one word, that's what they're running with within the structure and the long form. It's interesting, but I think sometimes when you get away from more the short form and things like that. And the thing too, when you're doing an improv show, is you may have 16 bits in a show. Maybe half of them are either halfway decent or really good, and the other half are like, oh, they just made that up. The expectations aren't that high. Heralds, that's what it is. Heralds they came up with a herald. A herald is you take one word and you incorporate it all night. And I think just the herald came from, we're tired of sex toys and gynecologists, proctologists, and bathrooms. But, and again, I think it's an interesting art form, but when you start to get away and you tell the audience, I think you're just going to give me crap. And if you don't know how to manage that, and try to get the audience to be more creative, then you're going to block them by just, okay, I only need one word for the night, and that's what we're going to go with. It's interesting to see that created. But when you're not really coming back to your audience, particularly improv, I just really feel like you need that symbiotic relationship when you are doing improv.
Well, I would like to share this actually. Okay. This is, again, by no means a all-inclusive sort of thing here, but this was the beginning of when I was starting to put together an actual class about creativity. This is some of the stuff that I came across here, just like the different techniques. I'll just read a piece here. Creativity techniques are methods that encourage creative actions, whether in the arts or sciences. They focus on a variety of aspects of creativity, including techniques for idea generation and divergent thinking, methods of reframing problems, changes in the affective environment, and so on. They can be used as part of problem-solving, artistic expression, or therapy. Some techniques require groups of 2 or more people, while other techniques can be accomplished alone. These methods include word games, written exercises, and different types of improvisation or algorithms for approaching problems. Aleatory techniques are exploiting randomness are also common. It talks about aleatory techniques. It's the incorporation of chance, of random elements into the process of creation, especially the creation of art or media. It's commonly found in art, music, and literature, particularly in poetry. And there was a movie came out in 1979 called Chance, which he produced by the flip of a coin or the roll of a dice. John Cage, the avant-garde musician, used to use the I Ching to develop different musical notes. He would use star maps superimposed over a blank sheet of music paper. As to how to write music. There was like rolling dice, flipping coins, picking something out of a hat, or selecting random words from a dictionary. there was research. If you want to start researching this on your own, I would say Edward de Bono is one guy that got into this. There's Richard Restak and Anthony Burgess. They would achieve these different ideas from just these different techniques of just this random chance interaction of random elements. Improvisation. Mm-hmm. We don't have to go there. We already know that. But also in problem solving. And this is problem solving methodologies for getting stuff done in business and corporate situations. But, in product development is where creativity also comes in. If this is something that you wish to go and research, because there's so much to this, and there's no way we're going to get to everything here. But some of the research that I pulled out, problem-solving tools and methodologies to support creativity. There's a thing called TRIZ, T-R-I-Z. This is a real meaty one to get into, so we don't have the time here. But it's basically contradiction matrix is what it's called. You've got another thing called creative problem-solving process. It's a complex strategy. It's also known as the Osborne-Parnas process. Edward de Bono's got a couple things called there's one thing he wrote called the lateral thinking process. Mm-hmm. There's the 6 thinking hats. There's ordinal priority approach. Then there's the right brain, left brain. That whole thing of creativity, that was it's called the Harriman brain dominance instrument. Are you more right-brained or left-brained? Brainstorming and brainwriting, and that's just whatever. Mm-hmm. I remember actually watching a documentary about Mick Jagger and the brainstorming and brainwriting, how he just carries a notebook with him and a pen like all the time, and whatever random, he's just writing. And then he comes back to it later. Then business war games. It's for the resolution of competitive problems. The method of USIT of convergent creativity. Thought experiments and the 5 W's. Mm-hmm. And it's when it talks about in project management, for project management purposes, group creativity techniques are creativity techniques used by a team in the course of executing a project. Some relative techniques are brainstorming, the nominal group technique, the Delphi technique, idea/mind mapping, the affinity diagram, the multicultural decision analysis, and all this is referenced in a thing called the Guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge.
And actually, I'm thinking now the SWOT analysis is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Okay, there we go. Thank you.
So that is, and that a lot of times is used in business. People sit there, okay, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our opportunities? What can we go on here? And then what could threaten us? And again, that's a good team building, because if you can get everybody in there, because not everybody's going to see things exactly the same way. Mm-hmm. So if you give people the opportunity to do that, you can just really strengthen your team. But I think what you're bringing up here is just so good, that creativity is applicable anywhere, and really particularly in science, because you come up with a hypotheses and then you've got to creatively debunk yourself to make sure that your hypotheses, if it goes through all these different tests, is actually going to hold up. And I think as artists, sometimes the freedom that we have is you just go with it. You don't sit there and go, oh, hypothetically, if I write this particular thing, how is that going to go? Write it. And then if it's not, then again, you can work on it some more. But, I love these.
There's the next thing that I found in this was, it says group creativity techniques can be used in a sequence. For example, number 1, gather the requirements using idea and mind mapping. That's like, how does one thought follow another? Mm-hmm. And there's no right or wrong. Just how does one thing snowball into the next thing? Mm-hmm. Then it's 2, continue generating ideas by brainstorming. 3, construct an affinity diagram based on the generated ideas. Identify the most important ideas by applying the nominal group technique. And 5, obtain several rounds of independent feedback using Delphi technique. And this is all, I mean, it's just, I'm just going over this very quickly, but there's so much out there. There's some things you can do to actually get your own creativity going, or get other people's creativity going. There's one's called the unusual uses task, which is you're given some kind of ordinary object, like a broom. It's like, okay, well, what do you use a broom for? To get dirt off the floor. It's like, okay, well, what else could you use a broom for that has nothing to do with its intended purpose? And just pass the thing around the group, and just, what else could you do with this? Also, because there was actually a study done about walking. And if you want to increase your creativity, take long walks. That's just, then there's sleep and relaxation is another one. Keep dream journals. Keep a dream journal by your bed and write stuff down as you dream. Whether it makes sense or not is not the point. Just get it down. And and this is something I had talked about before, but it talks about Salvador Dali and Thomas Edison. I think Carl Jung also used to do something like this. But it says one technique used by Salvador Dali was to drift off to sleep in an armchair with a set of keys in his hand. When he fell completely asleep, the keys would fall and wake him, allowing him to recall his mind's subconscious imaginings. It says Thomas Edison used the same technique with ball bearings, and Carl Jung as well. Meditation, and I went into this a while ago, to really develop a solid meditation practice really does help you open up creatively. The thing about it is it's slow to come on, and it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of perseverance and diligence. There's so many ways, and there's no way we're going to get through everything, but this is something I just had started putting this all together. The class never wound up happening, but I do have all of this. There's so much to the science of it, and I personally, I love psychology. I always love psychology. I think that's one of the things that is kept me coming back to acting, is the whole psychology of the actor, and in understanding your character and why they do what they do, and all that sort of thing. It's just, and just the psychology of it has always fascinated me. But there's so much out there, and we just, it comes down to, we just get afraid of ridicule. We get afraid of criticism, and it's a shame, because there's so much to this, and it could really help the individual, and it could really help humanity to heal. They do, art therapy in prisons. It just feels good to be creative.
It does. And one thing that we've actually used in classes that you can actually get from the App Store is the Sikio app. I'll put that in the notes. That's really cool, because you can just sit there and go, you know what? I've got a friend here. We're just going to play improv games here, or you can do it by yourself. And okay, give me a character and a location, and give me a situation. I'm going to create a monologue just based on that. And in some ways, with the internet, that is something that's cool, is you can put your art out there. In our day, you had the 3 networks, and then maybe you'd have 6 to 8 shows if you went from 7 to 11 or whatever, and they were half-an-hour shows or full-hour shows. So 7 days a week, you might have had 30 or 40 shows that were being produced in quasi-prime time, in addition to the talk shows, and that was it. Now think about all the shows that you can see on streaming, all the different things that you can access. You can go on YouTube. If you're an actor, I have a series that's kind of like Detective Grace O'Hara. I'm putting that out there on TikTok, and sometimes I get anywhere from 200 to 1,000 views of people looking at that. And I'm like, oh my God, 20 years ago, I would never have been able to do that. But now I'm just doing these silly characters. I'm putting them out there. You're reading poetry and Shakespeare, and those are getting views too. So you're not always, you don't have to, you may create in isolation, but you can still get it out there.
The Metropolitan Opera's on TikTok, the National Theater, the Royal Shakespeare Company. For all the weirdness of TikTok, and it can get pretty weird. Yeah. But there is a really good aspect to it. I mean, you can get yourself out there and you can share this.
YouTube's a little more old school, 2006 or 7, I think it came about. And then, Instagram too, but there's just something about the algorithm on TikTok that, man, your videos can go on there and an hour later I'm like 700 people have looked at this.
Yeah, the last time, I forget which one it was I think I did one of the Shakespeare's. I pretty much did it, shot it, hit send, and within 5 minutes I'm getting like these like hearts and people are following you, and hundreds of people within like a couple of minutes, and I'm like, that's really gratifying.
It is.
Because it's it's the thing of it is it's so important to get the stuff out there. What is going to happen to your brilliant ideas once you get them out into the world, that you don't have control over. How people are going to perceive them, how they're going to do that, you have no control over. But for the good of your own sanity, for the good of the people around you, for the good of the world at large, we've got to get our ideas out there, and we've got to just take time to listen to other people and see what they think and how they think about it. And we're I don't know if we're losing it just yet, but we're certainly not using it as much. And I just, we have 2 very creative daughters, and I really wish they had known the world before the internet. Because we're going to be the last generation who knows the world without this technology, and in some ways it is such a wonderful, brilliant thing, but in other ways it's such a mind-numbing, creativity killing sort of an entity, and it's such a shame, because we have all these tools, and we're just, the younger generation is becoming unaware that we have them in the first place, and that would be just a tragedy.
So get out there, get creative, keep a little notebook where you can jot ideas down, not necessarily on your phone, because you could lose your phone, and nobody could really hack in a legal pad. So if you have a legal pad, and if you write in cursive like I do, they probably won't be able to read it either, so you'll be fine. But yeah, go forth, be creative, whether it is acting, whether it is writing, whether it is painting, whether it is cooking.
Computer science.
Sewing.
Architecture.
Any of that stuff. Science.
Machine building.
Yep. Trying to figure out how their tadpoles get their legs on them and become frogs. That's something that fascinated me as a kid. But anyway, guys, I hope this has been helpful.
It's by no means complete.
It's by no means complete. This would probably be a multi-podcast as we think of other creative brain things. But again, just to get you started, just to kind of kick off, and just ways that you can improve your creative brain, because it does make you feel better when you do that. It's so good for your psyche. There's so much science behind that. So get out there and get creative. Thanks.
Much love, guys. Until next time.
We appreciate you guys tuning in, and keep in mind that you can catch us on our social media, Creative Actors Lab on Instagram and Facebook, and by the same name on YouTube. And for more on what we do, you can go to our website,
creativeactorslab.com, all one word. Thank you for listening. Stay curious, make art, not war. Much love until next time.